Please welcome pianist Aristo Sham. Aristo, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm talking to you from my apartment in Manhattan.
Mhm.
Where are you right now?
So I'm in Arvika, Sweden. So that's in the west of Sweden in a small town of 15,000.
And we might think that you actually have just one of those Zoom pictures behind you, but in fact, it's not. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not. So this is from my garage and looking out into the open, I guess.
And so we're actually seeing snow on the ground behind you?
Hmm.
That's amazing. In New York, it was in the 60s this weekend.
Oh,
So
wow.
snow seems quite a long way away.
Yeah.
So, Aristo, you will be offering your debut concert coming up, and we have decided to split it into two parts. The
Hmm.
first part will be December 9th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And
Hmm.
can you tell us what you're going to play on that program?
So I'll be playing Debussy's second book of Images, and then Saad Haddad's Vignettes, which is a new commission by YCA. I'm very excited about that piece. And then Brahms's monumental third piano sonata, Opus 5.
Okay, it sounds like a fantastic program. I'm going to ask you about each piece. Let's start with the Brahms. As
Mhm.
you mentioned, it's a monumental piece. How long is this piece and how many movements?
Yeah, so the Brahms sonata is unusually in 5 movements and ranges from 30 to 37 minutes, depending on the repeats and interpretation. And I think it's one of the great hallmarks of romantic piano music, and it's so rich and so moving in many different ways.
Well, that begins to answer the next question, but how did you come to pick this piece for your program? It really is the biggest piece on your program.
Mhm. I think, well, first of all, it feels very close to me, and I relate to a lot of the music, and I see like because Brahms wrote this when he was very young, and I see a lot of stuff that as a young musician I can interpret very well and deliver something to the audience. And of course, it's also very virtuosic and very expressive and beautiful. So I think it's perfect for a program like this.
Oh, that's great. Do you have a favorite moment or a couple of favorite moments in this piece that we might listen for?
Yeah, so I think the most important moment of the whole piece is towards the end of it, maybe 4 minutes from the end. There's this kind of universal love, ode to joy kind of theme, which is a chorale in D flat major, which I think sums up the entire piece, its vision and its meaning. And of course, there are many other beautiful moments as well, such as the climax of the second movement towards the end, where it's explosive and triple forte, and it's like an outburst of all romanticism and love.
Does this Brahms piece, does it have a program? I mean, you mentioned love and these ideals. Are there things that we know about it that Brahms intended?
So Brahms, in his instrumental music, tried to kind of hide all hints of programmatic music. So all we can do is guess. But at that time, he was living above the Schumanns in an apartment. So we always say that a lot of Brahms's music is inspired by Clara and his relationship to both the Schumanns. And I think in this piece, there's a lot of that. There's so much romance that we cannot ignore the fact that there was this thing going on between them.
We actually have a little clip of you playing, so we will pause and let people enjoy that now. And a rather substantial contrast to the Brahms, you're beginning the program with Debussy. How would you summarize the differences between Brahms and Debussy as composers?
Well, that's a huge question. So with
It is.
Brahms, it's like, well, he's at the same time an outpouring of romantic ideas and beautiful melodies, but also one of the most academic composers out there with his structures, his kind of like structures, both horizontal, vertical, and overall, and his construction and like his conception of music is incredibly well thought out. And then Debussy is kind of in the same way, but in an impressionist, or so we say impressionist sort of style. And his music is about colors and textures and paintings, and it's a world away from the sort of emotional storytelling of Brahms.
And these are much shorter pieces, right? There's
Mhm.
three movements to the second book. How long is each movement about?
Yeah, so the three movements together is about 13, 14 minutes. And so each movement's about 4 or 5 minutes. And they're each one separate painting of, well, painting a depiction of a scene that evokes a lot of imagery.
Well, that was my next question was if Brahms deliberately tried to hide some of his programs or kept it to himself, Debussy does not. Can you tell us what he tells us about each of these movements?
Yeah, so the movements are a cloche à travers les feuilles, which is bells in the midst of fallen leaves, and then the temple, which is a Balinese, sort of evokes like Balinese music, and then Poisson d'Or, which is goldfish, which is inspired by the paintings of koi from Japan.
So if you're taking these three very descriptive, colorful pieces and comparing it to a 35-minute sonata, what does it require from you as a pianist to learn this music and to be ready to perform it? How is that different, the two pieces?
With the Debussy, it's, well, first of all, it's technically incredibly precise and challenging. So there's a lot of that to sort out, but it's so important that we always base that on the imagery we're trying to evoke. And so for me, when I prepare these pieces, it's always at the forefront of my focus. It's like, how do I convey this picture or this feeling? And especially during these times, I think that like music like Debussy is like a great way to travel. Like with these three pieces, we go to kind of three different countries and cultures, and kind of gives us like a taste of what life was like before the pandemic.
You know, these two composers, Debussy and Brahms, represent two very different aesthetic schools of composition that were happening in Europe. They didn't overlap in time, but they do represent these two different streams. Um, do you lean one way or the other, sort of French or German?
Not particularly. I think the beauty of being a musician is that we get to try everything and enjoy everything. And I think that's why I love being a pianist so much.
Okay, fantastic. So the other piece that you're playing on the December 9th program is a world premiere by Saad Haddad. So Saad
Mhm.
Haddad is the composer in residence for young concert artists. And in fact, when he was being selected, you played a part in that. You were invited to look at some composers and choose which one had the music that resonated with you. So what were your first impressions of Saad's music?
I thought it was extremely interesting because there's not a lot of classical music that has Middle Eastern influences, and he works that very well into sort of classical music structures and makes it in a way that's very digestible and understandable for audiences. And I was very impressed by that.
All right. And so this piece is called Vignettes for Piano. And is it about what, 10 minutes long?
Yeah, it's about 10, 12 minutes, yes.
So none of us have heard anything about it. How would you describe his musical language and how would you describe this piece?
Well, so this piece is written for scordatura piano. So there's four notes that are tuned down a quarter tone. So just by that, we have a completely different landscape of the instrument, and which is so interesting. And no one's ever heard the instrument like that. And with that, he is much more able to convey these sort of Middle Eastern sort of idioms and textures. And I think this piece is a play on a lot of that, on textures, on atmospheres, on the colors on the piano that we're completely not used to before.
So help us understand, you're saying that there are four notes that are tuned differently than they would regularly be tuned on the piano. And why is he doing that?
So he says that a lot of there's some amount of like Middle Eastern inspired classical music that's written for normal Western instruments, but he says like that's always like an approximation or almost like a parody of the culture. So with these detuned notes, he's much more able to convey what he really feels is representative of the music, of the culture.
Oh, thanks. And if people don't know, the Western equal tempered tuning system is just one approximation of how different cultures have separated the octave. And so there's many cultures that use very different tuning systems. And so to take a Western instrument and show that influence, one has to find a way to work around the equal tempered nature of the scale.
Exactly. So I think this is a very interesting experiment to see how we can do this sort of fusion of art.
And what kinds of textures does he use? Is this a piece based on melody? Is it a piece based on rhythm and texture? What should we listen for?
So it's vignettes, so it's in several different parts. And so in the beginning, there's more sort of texture and introduction of these different tones and also of different sounds that we've never heard of, such as like hitting the wood of the keys, and it's by not really actually hitting the strings but just the wood. And there's a lot of resonance going on as well in the first part of the piece, and then eventually it goes more and more into melody, and so that's an interesting evolution that we can hear out for.
And my last question on this is, I think it's quite an honor but also a challenge to have a piece written for you that you are going to offer the world premiere for. How is that a different challenge as a pianist than picking up Debussy or Brahms?
Well, so the most obvious difference is that with Debussy and Brahms, we can go on Spotify and YouTube, and there's a million different recordings that we can reference. And with this, we don't. So at first, we have to rely on our own instincts and our pure reading of the score. And then we also have the luxury of working with the composer and really going back and forth about how the interpretation or different ideas even in the compositional aspect. And that's always a very interesting and enlightening experience.
So how have you and Saad been working together? Because obviously you're on two different continents right now.
Yes, so before the pandemic, I actually went to New York twice to meet Saad, and we discussed a lot of different aspects about the piece. And also he actually got a piano in that tuning, and so I got to try it out a bit and see what it feels like and what we can do with that instrument. And so that was the last time was in February, so we already had an opportunity to really think about the piece and sit for it for a while. So now just relying on electronic communication has been okay.
Well, you bring up something that I wanted to ask about, which was your original debut concert was to be in early April. And I'm very sad to say it was one of the very first things that young concert artists had to cancel because of the pandemic. Can you tell us what did it feel like to learn about this pandemic and how it was suddenly changing everything for musicians?
Well, I still remember the 1 week when it all happened in mid-early March. It was well, when the travel ban came into place, it was actually on my birthday, and I was having dinner with friends in Boston, and then the travel ban came in place, and I was like, okay, I need to go back to Europe, otherwise I might be stuck somewhere. And so from then, like, obviously our worlds turned completely upside down, and we've had to find new ways to kind of thrive, like mentally and professionally, because like what we usually do is completely sort of annihilated. So um, I remember in the beginning, I was still thinking that April might be a possibility. Like there might still be a chance of things happening by then, but obviously that did not happen. And so from, I think, April onwards, I embarked on a number of different projects to keep myself busy and make good use of this time, because usually we're traveling a lot and playing a lot of different concerts, and we don't really have time to really sit down and work on projects with ourselves. And so that's also been a great experience and a great luxury, and I learned a lot and developed a lot during this time.
I remember you did a very large Chopin project early on in the pandemic. What pieces did you actually play in that project?
So from April to May, I played kind of all the major works of Chopin. Like I did an online concert every 10 days. So I played all the sonatas, all the scherzi, all the ballades, all the etudes, like a number of late pieces and so on and so forth. And with that, I felt like I was really able to get into like a composer's sort of musical world and emotional world. And that's like a luxury that I did not have before.
So it was very fruitful. You actually learned things from that you couldn't have learned otherwise.
Exactly. So with this time I had on my hands, I was able to discover something about music and about myself that I would not have been able to with a normal schedule.
Okay. And following that project, have you tackled other projects, or have there been other opportunities for big learning during the pandemic?
Yeah. So after the Chopin project, I was kind of like addicted to learning big sets of a composer's oeuvre. So I learned all of Brahms's piano music from then to about late August. And I was supposed to record that on radio in Hong Kong, but then Hong Kong experienced another surge in infections and radio visits were canceled. So that did not happen as well.
I'm sorry. That's really amazing. So are you the kind of person as an artist that you need to set up some very big challenges as a way to sort of direct growth and your activity?
Yeah, so I think in general, I need sort of goals and challenges to keep myself moving. And with this pandemic, I learned to how to really set them for myself and keep myself moving without sort of external factors.
Well, that's wonderful. Tell us actually a little bit about what the day in the life of Aristo Sham looks like. When do you practice? How much do you practice? What do you do when you're not practicing?
So during the pandemic, I guess I've been able to practice in an average maybe of three or 4 hours, and that for me is a lot compared to usually. So I usually get up, eat something, and then I don't like to practice early on in the day, so I just rest and do other things, read or catch up with people, and then practice. And then during the pandemic, I also had a chance to like start cooking a bit, and so that's been very nice. And sometimes I like to play video games as well and watch TV. I have a very simple life in that way.
It sounds very nice. So you're in Sweden. I know you just finished a degree in Boston, which hopefully you'll tell us about. But you've actually lived in quite a few different places. I think you've had a very international life. Can you tell us the different places you've lived?
So I was born in Hong Kong, and I lived there until when I was 14. And then I went to high school in London at Harrow School. It was a boarding school. And then I was there for 5 years. And then when I was 19, I moved to the States to attend Harvard University and New England Conservatory. And I just finished there this year, so I'm now in Sweden.
Congratulations.
Thank
So,
you.
well, I want to ask about the degree, but before then, you live in Sweden, but you were doing a degree in Boston. How did you come to live in Sweden?
So I started coming to Sweden in 2017 when I met this professor, so Professor Julia Mustrand Dahlqvist, who I met at a competition and invited me to maybe try working here and just hang out. And then we had a wonderful time together. And so I started coming a bit more often. And then I really fell in love with the place with, the beautiful nature and the easygoing character of the culture and the people. And so in the summer of 2019, I bought a house here and moved here.
Oh, that's fantastic. So do you think Sweden is where you'll live for quite a while?
I'm not sure for how long, but for the time being, it's quite nice being based here. But you know, the world is so volatile right now, so I don't like to think about the future.
It also probably is it a nice in between Hong Kong and the US?
Yeah, so it's quite close to Hong Kong and also quite accessible to the US. And of course, we have Europe by our doorstep. So it's quite nice to be close to these major music markets.
Oh, nice. So this degree you did at Harvard and New England Conservatory. So this was a dual degree program?
So I did economics at Harvard and then piano performance at New England Conservatory. And it's a 5-year program that gives me a bachelor's in the former and master's in music.
So for most ordinary people, either of these degrees would be all-consuming, stressful, monumental tasks. How did you get them both done?
Well, there's a lot of support that the program does give, but of course there are moments where I'm like, oh, I'm so stressed out. There's so much happening that it's difficult to juggle. But I think there's always so many mentors and people around that help us and understand like the difficulties of doing these things. So with this program, there's a lot of infrastructure there to help us to be able to complete these degrees, and very thankful for that.
Do you think that you'll use your economics degree in the future? I mean, are you sort of committed to a musical path, or the future is wide open? Who knows what you'll do?
Well, I think definitely the future is wide open and I don't know what I'm going to do. But for now, I'm 100% committed to music. But I think what I gained the most from my economics degree is, of course, the liberal arts education, where we were able to learn about all sorts of different disciplines, but also it kind of, like the most fruitful thing I think about now is that it kind of expanded like my way of thinking and like my capacity for learning. And that's something that now I'm able to sort of redirect towards music right now.
So would you actually say these two degrees are complementary?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. I'm jealous. I think it's wonderful for musicians to have the time, the capacity to study something else in depth. Did you have a thesis or a senior project related to your Harvard degree?
So I did not have one single senior project, but I wrote a number of big research papers in relation to the degree.
Oh, okay. Was there a moment, either high school, earlier, or college, where you knew you wanted to sort of pursue life as a concert pianist?
So as a person, I'm always sort of go with the flow and like I don't really think about the future or plan ahead. So I did a number of competitions when I was very young, like when I was 10 and 12 and got some good results. And from then it was always like a back and forth between, it's possible to go forward and be a concert pianist 100%, but also possible to do something else completely. And so it's been back and forth with that since I was 10 to when I was about 20, really.
Oh, that's great. You came to YCA in 2018 from the international auditions, and we're thrilled to present this concert. We have decided to do it in 2 parts because people are sort of digesting virtual concerts in different ways. We thought it would be wonderful to break it up. So the second part has 2 pieces. What pieces are you playing on the second part?
So in the second part of the concert, I'm playing Mozart's last piano sonata in D major, K576, and Carl Wine's first piano sonata written in 1990. So
Carl Wine is probably a composer that many of our audience are not familiar with. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
So Carl Wine is an Australian composer and born in the 50s. And his music is extremely accessible to the public and kind of mixes a bunch of different styles and styles of music that fit so well together in the classical structure, and I really enjoy playing that.
So if this is a piano sonata, did Carl Wine only write 1 piano sonata?
So he has, actually, I think last year he published his 4th. So
okay.
His 4 piano sonatas now.
Sorry, so I missed it. Is this the first one?
Yes, this is the first piano sonata.
And it's quite different than the Brahms. I mean, how many movements is this sonata?
So this sonata is in two movements, and each movement is kind of in some sort of symmetry. So it's neither of the movements are in traditional sonata form, but in sort of some experimental form that has a very clear shape.
So if they're not in traditional sonata form, what do you think it means for a living composer to title something sonata, something so traditional and classic?
So as a musician, I'm obsessed with the idea of a sonata somehow. Like I love structures and I love these sort of non-programmatic titles. And I think to sort of challenge that and to insert sort of new life into this form is amazing for a living composer to do. And somehow there's no contention to whether this can be called a sonata or like just two character pieces or not. It somehow fits extremely well together. There's a sense of coherence about it, even without a traditional sonata form. And I think that's quite incredible.
Well, thank you. For somebody that's hearing this piece or Carl Wein's music for the first time, what should they listen for?
They should definitely listen out for the different textures of the music. As a musician, I love textures, and it's like a laboratory for sound and the playing of sound. And I think also audiences can listen out for the different styles that are incorporated in this music. There's a lot of jazz influences and also even up to like pop and house music that I can find and relate to in this music.
That's wonderful. We actually have a clip of you playing, which demonstrates some very virtuosic passages. How would you relate the challenges and difficulty of this piece compared to, let's say, the Brahms, the Debussy, the Mozart, the Haddad?
Also, this piece is written extremely pianistically and kind of friendly. So it's extremely virtuosic. It's difficult in some parts, but it's always very fulfilling. It's like there's a lot to work through, but it's kind of like glitters and stays in the hands forever, like for a very long time. So it's a very good piece for a pianist to have.
Well, thanks. Why don't we hear just a little bit of that clip now? So, Aristo, thank you for chatting with us. You
Thank you.
have two concerts coming up. The first is December 9th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be live streamed on the Young Concert Artists YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page. And then the second program will be December 12th at 2 p.m. So we'll do a Saturday matinee, and that will include the Mozart and the Carl Wein. We're really excited. Any last thoughts as we look forward to these two performances?
Well, I just hope that everyone can come and enjoy these performances and enjoy these works as much as I do.
Thank you. And if people can't watch the live streams, then we will be keeping them up on YouTube, and we invite you to see them at your convenience. Aristo, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.